When my wife collapsed at home, every second counted. But HOA President Karen blocked the ambulance at the gate, screaming about unauthorized vehicles. Those 3 minutes almost cost a life. So I made sure she'd never pull that stunt again by landing a rescue helicopter right in the middle of her precious HOA lawn. It started on a quiet Sunday morning, the kind where you think nothing bad could possibly happen. My wife Lena and I had been living in Maplewood Estates for about a year. Beautiful houses, tidy streets, and the most overbearing HOA in the county. I should have known things would go sideways the day I met Karen Langford, the HOA president. She had the kind of smile that made you nervous. All teeth, no warmth. Her hobbies included collecting HOA fines and gossip. When I bought the house, she showed up at my door with a binder of mandatory community guidelines. "Everything from fence color to visitor parking is regulated here," she said sweetly. "It keeps our neighborhood safe and orderly." I had nodded politely. "Sure, as long as it doesn't interfere with emergency vehicles." She blinked, confused. "Why would it?" I didn't answer. I was a paramedic, and I'd seen how much time could be lost to locked gates and stubborn people. Fast forward 6 months. I was making breakfast when I heard a crash. Lena had dropped her coffee mug. Then she slumped to the floor. "Lena?" I shouted, kneeling beside her. Her pulse was weak, her breathing shallow. I called 911 instantly. "Possible cardiac arrest," I told dispatch. "We're at 402 Maplewood Drive. Need immediate medical response." They were on their way. The ambulance came screaming down the road less than 5 minutes later. But the entrance to Maplewood Estates wasn't a simple gate. It was a fortress, an automatic gate with keypad access and a camera system monitored from the HOA office. The paramedics called me. "Sir, we're at the gate, but there's a woman here saying we can't come in without permission from the HOA." I froze. "What woman?" They said, "She's blocking us with her SUV." My stomach dropped. I didn't have to ask. I already knew. Karen. I sprinted out the door, ran barefoot down the driveway, and looked toward the entrance about 300 yards away. Sure enough, there she was standing in front of her white Lexus, waving her arms like she was directing traffic. The ambulance lights flashed red and blue, siren wailing, but she didn't move. I could barely hear her shouting over the noise. "You can't just enter private property. You need HOA clearance," I yelled until my throat burned. "That's my wife. She's dying." But she just pointed at the sign that said, "No unauthorized vehicles." The medics couldn't force their way through. It would have been a lawsuit. HOA rules, security codes, liability. 3 agonizing minutes passed before one of the neighbors, bless his soul, ran up, punched in his own gate code, and waved the ambulance through. By the time they reached my house, Lena had stopped breathing. I performed CPR right there on the living room floor until the medics took over. We got her pulse back, barely. As they loaded her into the ambulance, one of the paramedics muttered, "If we'd been 3 minutes earlier?" I didn't want to hear the rest. Lena survived, but the doctors said the delay could have cost her life. I didn't sleep for 2 nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those flashing lights trapped at the gate and Karen's smug face behind the wheel. When Lena woke up weak but smiling, she whispered, "You saved me." I squeezed her hand. "No," I said quietly, "you saved yourself. But I'm going to make sure nobody ever loses a life because of that woman." The next morning, I went straight to the HOA office. Karen sat behind her desk, surrounded by stacks of paperwork and a framed certificate that said, "President, Maplewood Estates HOA." "Morning," I said coldly. She smiled. "I heard your wife is doing better." "I'm so relieved." That was quite an incident, wasn't it? Though to be fair, the ambulance should have followed proper community protocol. I slammed my hand on the desk so hard that papers jumped. "Proper protocol?" "She was dying, Karen!" She flinched but tried to maintain her composure. "Please, Mr. Ellis, lower your voice. We can't make exceptions, or else everyone would claim an emergency." My voice trembled with rage. "You blocked a medical vehicle. You delayed life-saving care." She crossed her arms. "The HOA rules are clear. No unauthorized vehicles without prior notice? Prior notice?" I barked. "You think heart attacks schedule appointments?" She rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic." That's when I pulled out my phone and hit play. The paramedics had body cam footage I'd requested. On the screen, you could clearly see her SUV parked sideways across the gate and hear her voice saying, "You can't come in without HOA clearance." Her face turned white. "Karen," I said quietly, "you broke the law. And I'm filing a complaint, not just with the HOA board, but with the County Emergency Services Commission." She tried to stammer something, but I was already out the door. The next week was chaos. The county investigator came down, interviewed the EMTs, and watched the footage. The report concluded that Karen had obstructed emergency medical services, which could carry criminal charges. The HOA board panicked. They held an emergency meeting. Karen tried to defend herself, said she was protecting the community from potential imposters. The board voted 5-0 to suspend her indefinitely. But for me, suspension wasn't enough, because the HOA gate system, the one she'd abused, still existed. And I wasn't about to risk another second if Lena, or anyone else, needed help again. So I made a call to some old friends from my time in emergency response. "Hey, Jake," one of them said, laughing when I explained. "You want to make sure emergency access is guaranteed?" "Exactly," I said. "Then let's bring the bird." 3 days later, Lena came home from the hospital. I had a surprise waiting, a wide, freshly mowed clearing on the edge of our backyard, about the size of a tennis court. She looked at it, puzzled. "What's this?" I smiled. "Insurance policy." The next morning, I called the county air medical division. They owed me a favor from my paramedic days. Within an hour, the sound of rotors filled the sky. A red and white rescue med helicopter circled once, then landed perfectly in that clearing. The downdraft sent leaves flying everywhere. Neighbors poured out of their houses, phones out, jaws dropped, and of course Karen came running. She was furious, red-faced, hair whipping in the wind. "What is this?" she screamed over the noise. I waved cheerfully. "Emergency preparedness drill. You can't land a helicopter here," she shouted. "This is community airspace." "Not anymore," I said. "I filed the coordinates with the FAA this morning. This is a designated emergency medical landing zone. County approved." She blinked, completely thrown off. You can't do that without HOA permission!" I grinned. "Actually, I can. My property's outside the HOA's airspace jurisdiction, and the county prefers this to dealing with blocked ambulances." The helicopter crew climbed out, waved, and started marking coordinates with orange cones. Karen's voice cracked. This is outrageous. You're disrupting the peace." I leaned closer. "Peace was disrupted when you blocked an ambulance. Karen, I just made sure it never happens again." As the helicopter lifted off, the noise was deafening, but so was her silence. 2 days later, the HOA board called another meeting. The official minutes later leaked to half the neighborhood. Karen was permanently removed as president. Her actions were deemed a threat to community safety. The new HOA leadership installed a universal emergency override at the gate, giving first responders instant access. When they finished the installation, the county sheriff himself dropped by. "Heard you made quite the statement," he said, chuckling. "Helicopter, huh?" I smiled. "Sometimes you have to make your point from the sky." He laughed, tipped his hat, and said, "You did this community a favor." Karen tried to file a noise complaint about the helicopter, but it backfired. The county told her she'd be lucky not to face obstruction charges again. A month later, her house went up for sale. Nobody was surprised. As for me and Lena, she recovered fully, stronger than ever. We sit on the porch most evenings, watching the sunset over the newly cleared landing zone. Every now and then, a helicopter passes in the distance, and Lena squeezes my hand. "Still ready for takeoff?" She teases. "Always," I say, because in Maplewood Estates, the HOA learned something that day. You can block gates, but you can't block justice, and when life's on the line, I'll bring the sky down if I have to.